Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, COP28's final proposed deal references transition away from all fossil fuels, says move to enable the world to reach the net zero target by 2050. Israel says 197 aid trucks en route to Gaza after inspection at Kerem Shalom. UNGA votes to demand Gaza ceasefire. Biden says Putin is banking on the U.S. failing to deliver for Ukraine as he meets his Ukrainian counterpart in Washington. Zelensky says it would be insane for Ukraine to be willing to give up occupied territory. India remembers martyrs and victims who lost their lives while defending the parliament 22 years ago. Prime Minister pays floral tributes at the parliament premises. The big news we are tracking at DD India Live at present. The COP28 presidency released a proposed text of a final climate deal on Wednesday that would, for the first time, push nations to transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly and equitable manner so as to achieve net zero target by 2050 in keeping with the science. Country representatives have been called to what the COP28 presidency hopes is a final meeting later on Wednesday morning, where they could pass the deal and end 2 weeks of tough negotiations that have run a day into overtime. Deals struck at UN climate summits must be passed by consensus, at which point individual countries are responsible for delivering on the agreements through national policies and investments. India voted in favor of a draft resolution in the United Nations General Assembly that demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict, as well as the unconditional release of all hostages. The 193-member UNGA adopted the draft resolution introduced by Egypt at an emergency special session on Tuesday. The resolution was adopted with 153 votes in favor, while 23 nations abstained and 10 voted against the text. The UN resolution is not binding but carries political weight, reflecting a global view on the war. William Denslow gets us details from UN headquarters in New York. Before we get that report, let's get you more on the Israel-Hamas conflict. An Israeli agency released a video via X that showed trucks being inspected and transferred to Gaza. 197 aid trucks were screened and directed towards the region ahead via the Kerem Shalom crossing. According to UN, Israel is testing a new process for inspecting aid for Gaza at Kerem Shalom.
The support for this resolution was resounding. 153 nations voting at the UN General Assembly Hall, voting in favour of a resolution that demands the immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. This comes after a similar resolution was vetoed by the United States at the UN Security Council late last week. The US at the time saying that such a ceasefire would essentially give Hamas the time to regroup, and that's why they're against that move.
153 in favor, 10 against, 23 abstentions. Draft Resolution A/ES10/L27 has been adopted.
Significantly as well, the United States did offer an amendment to the resolution that was rejected. This called essentially for Hamas to be named and shamed in the resolution. Linda Thomas Greenfield, the US ambassador to the UN, saying that why is it so difficult for the international community to call out Hamas for the atrocities they committed on October 7th.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire and requires urgent and sustained attention. That civilians desperately need food and water and shelter and medical care. In addition, we support the release of all hostages immediately and unconditionally. Any ceasefire right now would be temporary at the best and dangerous at worst. Dangerous to Israelis, who would be subject to relentless attacks, and also dangerous to Palestinians, who deserve the chance to build a better future for themselves, free from Hamas.
Now, we had a very strong message as well from the President of the UN General Assembly, Dennis Francis, speaking at this session.
I used my recent attendance at the Doha Forum and every other platform I can to encourage cooperation among states with the same singular goal in mind: to make peace for all. In the name of humanity, I ask you all once again, stop this violence now.
Our challenge in this extraordinarily difficult time is to strike the right balance. The gravity and complexity of what the international community faces is underlined by the Secretary General invoking Article 99 of the Charter of the United Nations. We therefore welcome the fact that the international community has been able to find a common ground to address the multiple challenges facing the region right now.
William Denslow in New York, reporting for DD India.
Let's get to updates on Russia-Ukraine war now. U.S. President Joe Biden has urged Congress to approve billions of dollars for Ukraine, warning that not to do so would be a Christmas gift for the Russian leader. Biden met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House on Tuesday amid a funding fight which has seen Republicans refuse to support extra assistance for Kiev. Nick Harper gets us details from Washington.
US President Joe Biden used his remarks in the Oval Office and in the subsequent press conference to attack Republicans who are blocking new aid to Ukraine. He argued that Russia would be emboldened by the deadlock on Capitol Hill, adding history will judge harshly those who turn their back on freedom's cause. At issue, Conservative Republican lawmakers demand to allocate significant funding to strengthen security at the US-Mexico border. Without that, they say they're unwilling to support new funding for Ukraine. Biden noted that Russian TV had celebrated the Senate's failure last week to pass a bill, the television host pointing out it was good for Russia. In an obvious dig at Republicans, Biden said, if you're being celebrated by Russian propagandists, it's probably time to rethink what you're doing.
The American people, Democrats and Republicans, alike, I think, understand this, and they understand the very real fight that's going on right now. In the winter, this winter, Putin plans once again to bombard Ukraine's electric grid, intends to, with rockets, and plunging families into darkness in the coldest part of the year, and doing great damage. We can't and won't let him succeed. We mustn't let him succeed in that. Mr. President, I've called on Congress to do the right thing, to stand with Ukraine and to stand up for freedom.
Ukraine is gradually becoming less dependent on aid, and we are moving to the right direction, and I want to discuss with the President how to strengthen it, especially enhancing our air defense and ability to destroy Russia's logistics. Our goals for 24 are clear: take away Russia's superiority and disrupt their offensive operations.
But with US lawmakers leaving Washington at the end of this week for the holidays and not returning until the new year, there's a race on to pass new legislation and new funding as soon as possible. Biden urged Congress to approve the money this week, saying if they didn't, they'd be giving Putin the greatest Christmas gift they could possibly give him. Meanwhile, the US Treasury announced new sanctions on more than 150 individuals and entities that the US says is allegedly helping Russia's military. The US says that those who've been blacklisted have supplied technology, tools and equipment to help Moscow in its fight against Kiev. One small win, Zelensky leaves Washington with an additional $200 million, money Congress has already approved and that Biden is now releasing to Kiev. But it's nowhere near the more than $60 billion that Biden had asked Congress to approve. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
The United States on Tuesday imposed sanctions on more than 250 companies and individuals, including in China, Turkey and the United Arab Emirates, for supporting Russia over the Ukraine war. The U.S. Treasury said it imposed sanctions on a network of 4 entities and 9 people based in China, Russia, Hong Kong and Pakistan over the facilitation and procurement of Chinese-manufactured weapons and technologies to Russia. These latest restrictions target Russia's future energy capabilities, banks and its metals and mining sector. Russia dismisses Western sanctions as illegal and says they will not impede the development of its economy. At least 34 people have been injured and a children's hospital as well as homes damaged after Russia launched a missile assault on Kiev, Ukrainian officials said on Wednesday. Ukraine's air defense systems downed all missiles targeting the capital. Falling debris caused injuries and destruction in 3 of Kiev's districts on the eastern side of the Dnipro River. Debris also hit several residential buildings in the Dniprovsky district. The district's water supply was also damaged. Ukraine's biggest mobile network operator, Kyivstar, was hit on Tuesday by the largest cyber attack of the war with Russia so far, knocking out mobile and internet services for millions and the air raid alert system in parts of Kyiv region. Russian hacktivist group Killnet put out a statement on social media claiming responsibility for the attack. They did not provide evidence for their claim. Ukraine's Kyivstar, which has 24 million subscribers, in a statement said that it had restored some services and hoped all its operations would be back to normal on Wednesday. Its CEO, Alexander Komarov, said the attack was a result of the war with Russia.
We have been hit as a result of this war. The aim was to damage infrastructure. I can say they partially reached the aim, thanks to the response by Kyivstar employees. I have to explain, significantly damaged infrastructure, limited access, we could not counter it at the virtual level, so we shut down Kyivstar physically to limit the enemy's access to Kyivstar infrastructure.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk's government won a vote of confidence in Parliament. Voting results showed Tusk received the support of 248 lawmakers, while 201 voted against him at the end of a sitting that was disrupted by a far-right deputy. In his inaugural speech to the Parliament, Tusk called on Poland's fractious political class to unite, saying it cannot afford divisions while Russia is waging a war of aggression across the border. Tusk's government will be sworn in by President Andrzej Duda today before the new Prime Minister heads to Brussels for a summit of European Union leaders. The UK government has won a crucial vote on a controversial plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda to have their claims processed there. But several MPs from the governing Conservative Party abstain from voting and say that they'll try to amend the legislation next year. DD India's Ollie Barrett reports from London on this.
This is just the first stage, really, of this legislation going through Parliament in the UK. And so while this can be seen in some ways as a victory for Rishi Sunak, there are certainly potential problems further down the line still to come. A series of his own Conservative MPs abstained in this vote, saying that they hope that the government will toughen this legislation further down the parliamentary process. But on the left and in the moderate centre wing of the Conservative Party, quite a lot of Conservative MPs are saying, well, if this legislation is toughened any further, then we won't be able to support it anymore. So the Prime Minister still has a huge battle on his hands, seeing this legislation finally passed when it gets back to Parliament early next year. He insists that it's a policy that can work, it's legislation that is nearly watertight, and that therefore planes can get up and running in the new year to Rwanda with asylum seekers on board, and that this scheme therefore can begin to work as a deterrent against illegal migration. Critics of the policy say it simply won't work. The opposition Labour Party calls it a gimmick. Labour are also saying that they believe that the events of the last 24 hours or so in the House of Commons and the discussion among Conservative MPs shows that the Conservative Party is in chaos. The government, though, as I say, remains committed to this legislation. It remains committed to the agreement with Rwanda. The idea behind it is that it would see some asylum seekers sent to Rwanda to process their claims there. And the specific idea of this legislation, if it eventually gets passed, is to try and alleviate some of the concerns raised by the Supreme Court last month when judges struck down the policy as unlawful. Ollie Barrett in London, reporting for DD India.
And now we take a look at other stories making it to the headlines from across the world. Mexican migrants were seen waiting for the processing and transportation to temporary centers after crossing the Arizona border wall into the U.S. Migrants from different countries were gathered near the border town of Lukeville on Tuesday, which had been shut down last week temporarily by the government due to the overwhelming numbers. Bolivian rescuers are working to de-oil birds after a spill in Lake Titicaca, which came from a vegetable oil truck that had overturned last month. With over hundreds of them dead, the Andean coots, a native bird species, have been the most affected. We're heading for a short break, but still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Global Partnership for Artificial Intelligence Summit underway in New Delhi with focus on ensuring ethics, transparency and democratic values. Fed Chair Jerome Powell will announce the central bank's rate decision. On day 4 of Khelo India Para Games, para-athletes will be in action in parachuting, para-powerlifting and para-athletics. Haryana currently tops the medals tally.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs. With a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India Live and I'm Preeti. Let's get you more updates. The deadly terror attack on Indian Parliament 22 years ago shook the country. Today, India pays tribute to the martyrs who made the ultimate sacrifice while preventing the attack. In the tragic incident, 9 people were killed and 18 were injured, including 6 Delhi police and 2 Parliament security officials. One of the attackers wore a suicide vest that exploded after he was shot. This explosion killed him and the 4 other terrorists. The main suspects of the terror attack were identified as Afzal Guru and his cousin Shaukat Hussain Guru. In 2013, Afzal Guru was condemned to death and hanged in Tihar jail. Vice President and Rajya Sabha Chairman Jagdeep Dhankar and Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla led the nation in paying floral tributes to martyrs and victims of 2001 Parliament attack at Parliament premises. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also paid heartfelt tributes to the brave security personnel martyred in the attack. He said, and I quote him, "Their courage and sacrifice in the face of danger will forever be etched in our nation's memory." Several cabinet ministers and other members of Parliament also paid tributes to the fallen Jawans. President Draupadi Murmu also remembered the victims of the Parliament attack. In a tweet, she said, and I quote her, "On this day, 22 years ago, the nefarious plan of terrorists to eliminate the top line of political leadership of the country and damage our temple of democracy was foiled by the brave security personnel, including the 9 who laid down their lives for the motherland. The nation will forever remain in their debt. Their sacrifice will not be allowed to go in vain as we reiterate today our pledge to wipe out terrorism, a threat to humankind everywhere in all its forms and manifestations." Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also tweeted about the 2001 terror attack on the Indian Parliament. I quote him, he says, "Today we remember and pay heartfelt tributes to the brave security personnel martyred in the Parliament attack in 2001. Their courage and sacrifice in the face of danger will forever be etched in our nation's memory." Let's take a look at what is lined up on the 7th day of the winter session of Parliament today. In Lok Sabha, that is the lower house of Parliament, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will introduce the Central Goods and Services Tax Second Amendment Bill 2023 and the Provisional Collection of Taxes Bill 2023. Also, Communications Minister Ashwini Vaishnav will introduce the Post Office Amendment Bill 2023 for consideration and passage. The bill has already been passed by Rajya Sabha, that is the upper house of Parliament. While in Rajya Sabha, Law Minister Arjun Ram Meghwal will introduce the Repealing and Amending Bill 2023 for consideration and passage. Besides, Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan will introduce the Central Universities Amendment Bill 2023 for consideration and passage. Lok Sabha had already passed this bill. The three-day Global Partnership for Artificial Intelligence Summit is underway here in New Delhi. Inaugurating the event on Tuesday, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave a clarion call for a worldwide framework for ethical, responsible and secure development of the technology. According to a recent survey, people are more concerned than excited by the technology, with challenges ranging from data privacy to job displacement. Patrick Falk explores some of the issues at stake and also looks at what's being done to address them.
It's estimated today that there are more than 1 billion security cameras worldwide. They're tracking and recording every move and every moment. With the advent of artificial intelligence, experts say we're seeing a seismic shift towards autonomous surveillance systems with the ability to process vast amounts of data and identify patterns and anomalies to create a new world of possibilities for law enforcement and security. It's also ripe for abuse. This was one of the key sticking points on a European Union rulebook to regulate AI.
Europe has positioned itself as a pioneer.
Members reached a provisional deal on Friday to move forward with the legislation. They agreed governments can only use real-time biometric surveillance in public spaces to prevent specific threats like terrorist attacks or to search for suspects in serious crimes.
This is yes, I believe, a historic day.
Untargeted scraping of facial images on the internet to create facial recognition databases or social scoring based on social behavior, for example, are banned. The draft rules paved the way for the EU to become the first major world power to enact laws governing AI. But not everyone is happy.
Rights groups say the deal effectively means the EU has taken a step towards legalizing live public facial recognition. For many people, that's a step backwards in privacy protection.
According to Pew Research, data privacy is the leading concern among Americans when it comes to the negative impacts of artificial intelligence. It's just one of a myriad challenges in setting guardrails to prevent misuse of the technology. But AI is already revolutionizing industries, and the clock is ticking for governments to set standards on everything from the dissemination of information to ethics and more.
It'll be unthinkable not to have intelligence integrated into every product and service. It'll just be an expected, obvious thing.
According to Bloomberg Intelligence, the generative AI market could be worth as much as $1.3 trillion in the next 10 years. That's compared to a market size of about $40 billion in 2022. And it covers an array of industries. But with so much at risk, governments must balance the benefits and address the issues at stake without stifling opportunity.
I think there are huge possibilities, and I'm concerned that so much of the conversation is negative rather than looking also at the same time as some of the incredible ways of harnessing this never-before-seen power, which could be a huge, huge boost.
The European Union's AI Act could act as a blueprint for countries around the world to enact legislation. But there's likely still a long road to go before comprehensive and effective regulation falls into place. Patrick Falk in Singapore for DD India.
And the new Chief Minister of Indian state of Madhya Pradesh takes oath on Wednesday. BJP's Dr. Mohan Yadav took oath as Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh after the successful victory in the recent concluded state elections. Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended the swearing-in ceremony along with Union Home Minister Amit Shah and BJP President JP Nadda.
मैं भारत की प्रभुता और अखंडता अक्षुण्ण रखूंगा। मैं मध्य प्रदेश के राज्य के मुख्यमंत्री के रूप में अपने कर्तव्यों का श्रद्धापूर्वक और शुद्ध अंतःकरण से निर्वहन करूंगा तथा मैं भय या
Let's take a look at other stories making it to the headlines from across India now. The Union government's nationwide outreach initiative, Viksit Bharat Sankalp Yatra, is continuing its successful campaign in Agra of the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh. The Yatra continues its journey in the rural and urban belts across Agra, informing and empowering citizens about the central government's flagship schemes. People are participating in large numbers, especially women and farmers, and many are happily sharing their success stories. Heavy snowfall has been reported in the Himalayan state of Uttarakhand. The famous snow spot Auli region in the Chamoli district was covered in a fresh blanket of snow. Auli is India's premier ski resort destination. Originally developed as a paramilitary base, Auli's skiing slopes are popular among tourists and professionals alike. In winter, Auli hosts several snow adventure events. Let's get you an update on Fed's last policy decision of the year. Investors widely expect the Federal Open Market Committee to hold interest rates steady at its meeting. The committee interest rate decision will be announced on Wednesday, and Fed Chairman Jerome Powell will address the media after the announcement. Fed is expected to keep its funds rate unchanged and to challenge the rate cut expectations. According to a recent survey, U.S. consumers are backing down from their expectations of rising gas and rental costs, and they expect inflation to moderate over the next 12 months. On to sports now. In Khelo India Para Games 2023 on day 4, that is today, para athletes will be in action in athletics, shooting, powerlifting. So far, Haryana is topping the medals tally with 23 golds, 29 silvers and 10 bronze medals. Uttar Pradesh is second with 19 golds, 14 silvers and 7 bronze medals. That's it in this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and also Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.